Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So no matter who you lead, you'll always have bad days and stressful times. Even the most successful leaders occasionally deal with setbacks, failures, disappointments. Now, as a leadership facilitator, resilience, I believe, is more important than ever in today's world. I think the volatile times you're going through will not end soon. But the good news is resilience, the way in which you respond to life's challenges, is a skill that can be developed through intentional observation and practice. Now, simply said, resilience is the ability to bounce back from failure, personally stay
Correct.
positive, and adapt well to stressful situations. Now, how do leaders deal with these situations? Has a huge impact on team performance. If they blame others for failure, refuse to enforce accountability, try to avoid problems, I think it becomes just more impossible for a team to move forward. Welcome to today's Q&A on leadership resilience. Today I have with me Vikas Dua. Vikas, thank you for joining in.
Pleasure.
It's really nice to be talking to you again. Vikas, whom I know from his Wipro BPO days, where he was a part of this huge hiring factory, has come a long way as a very successful HR and recruitment professional in the last 15 years, having worked with both startups and large MNCs, including Concentrix and Stratic AGs. Currently, Vikas is the chief HR mentor at Attayn.co, a very disruptive HR tech firm which is working on enhancing and democratizing knowledge sharing in the academic space. Vikas is also a TEDx speaker, a vlogger, and a blogger on HR practices. Well, the next time you're on LinkedIn, you will sure not to miss his self-designed HR in My Heart series, where he shares some interesting anecdotes and tips for working professionals. Thanks for joining in, Vikas. It's great to be having this talk around something that been around for decades in leadership, but has seen enormous demand in the recent months. The way I guess managers and leaders are putting their steps forward.
Correct. Thanks for having me, Pawan. A pleasure to be here with you once again. I think, as you mentioned, we got to know each other way back in time during my Wipro days, and even then, it was such a pleasure interacting and working with you. And today, again, I'm happy to relive that moment. It's also been amazing to see
Right.
you grow entire organization and set it up to what Learngage today is, a well-known name in the training space. And the kind of work you've done in the space of assessments and in the space of training and development, I think is commendable. After all, I think if India has progressed in the last 10, 15 years, organizations like yours have actually contributed a lot to that success. So thank you for that as well.
Right. So great. Now you've been dealing with and also doling out a lot of leadership tips through your LinkedIn channel, and I think I really love subscribing to almost all of them. Now, is there a framework or a template to start with to understand the nature of adversity and our responses to it in general before we talk about leadership and all of that?
Sure, Pavan. So, to the best of my knowledge, and I think I don't think I'll be proven wrong here, none of us in the world were ever prepared for such adversity. And the COVID-19 pandemic has come at a time and come at a point where pretty much the biggest economies of the world have been brought to the knees. And the question that you've posed in terms of how does one get prepared to deal with something like this is obviously a challenging one to answer. But I'll really say this, that there is no instruction manual that comes when it comes to leadership. That's
Right.
available to you, just like you
Right.
get one with a mobile phone or a laptop once you buy one, unfortunately. So many of us during our own journeys in different ways, in different lines of work, kind of experiment, fail, succeed, and that builds the model, so to speak, of
Yeah.
resilience,
True.
right?
Very true.
I'm reminded of a common scenario which plays out almost with all of us. I think I'll just take a few minutes to talk about that. I'm sure many of the listeners here will be able to relate to it. When you think back about your school days, you'll always remember that one student in the class who's typically the class topper or in the top five, very academic, always does well in the exams. And during the examination period, you notice that this is the same candidate who's studying in the bus, catching up on the last minute revision. He's got his book in his hands just outside the classroom examination hall, and literally reading it till the time the teacher says, put it aside, class, the exam is about to start, right? Uh, you also have in the same class another student who's average, doesn't really show up that well academically, but at the examination time, he's pretty chilled out, comes into the exam, does it. In some cases, possibly just scrapes through as well. At the end of 20 years, when you look back at that batch and you remember your classmates, many of us often feel that, the average guy who was a little chilled out, wasn't taking undue pressure, ended up actually doing better, so-called. I mean, just in relative terms.
Absolutely.
So, is that resilience really? I mean, is that how you fortify yourself, build yourself up to handle different kind of failures, like you said, bounce back time after time?
Yeah.
I would think so. And if you look at some of the research which has happened in this area, Bhavan, the leadership traits that resilient leaders are defined by are not very different from what generic leaders are defined by. But what is striking is that excellent communication skills, the ability to grow and develop others, and humility, and risk taking. These four leadership traits, they say, kind of defines or separates some of those leaders who are more resilient than the other leader next door. So to that extent, if one can consciously work on these parameters, look at developing themselves along this path, I think there is a chance that you should be able to, like they say, become more resilient. So that's what I would share at this point, Bhavan.
Yeah, sure. Now, I also believe that, from what we spoke, we all of us play this inner game, like a tug of war between this constructive and destructive thoughts, and beliefs that, but subtly, and I think more powerfully, that shapes our behaviors. Like you said, like there's no instruction manual, or there is a student who's, more confident about writing an exam, and the other student who just, keeps reading up, till the last minute. What does it mean for a leader to own his or her thoughts, to then influence an outcome, every time for himself and others?
Great question, Pawan. This is an extremely critical point, if you ask me, of owning your own thoughts and being able to channelize those thoughts in the right way, because that really is the starting point, no doubt about it. I'm reminded of a conversation that one of the reporters had with Martina Navratilova a couple of decades ago. And the gentleman asked her as to, at the age of 43, how do you get the power? How do you get the focus? How do you maintain your physique to be able to play the way you do?
Right.
And do you know what she said? She said, the ball doesn't know how old I am. Yeah.
True.
In effect, she's saying that all our battles in life are really fought in this 6-inch battleground, this space between your ears. And a lot of leaders, whether it's Satya Nadella, whether it's Sundar Pichai, I mean, look at the humble background they came up from and the heights they've achieved. It's all happened because they've managed to be resilient in some sense, being cognizant of themselves as a starting point. And the idea is not really that you have to succeed each and every time. That invariably will not happen. The human thought process is such that you will have a few off days. You will have a few days when you are not your best. But how quickly you spring back from that, how quickly you're able to move forward and take corrective action, I think is the game changer.
Okay.
In fact, Robin Sharma, in his book, The 5 a.m. Club, he touches upon this point very beautifully, which he talks about a concept which he calls personal mastery. And he lays it out pretty clearly in his book that really what all we are able to achieve in the external world is hugely dependent on what we are actually doing in our internal world. So it really starts from there. And if that ain't in the right condition, then your efforts are pretty much like someone struggling in the water, trying to save himself or herself from drowning. That's the way I would put it, Paul.
Sure. So if I take it in the last few months, and I think we've seen a lot of adversities, we've seen a lot of changes to the way we're working, and especially now the leaders need to achieve, all these targets and deliverables when their team members are working remotely. How does this whole, leadership behavior pan out according to you?
It's creating a whole new dimension. What's happening in the first phase of this transition, Pawan, is that a lot of leaders are trying to just copy and paste, in the sense, the practices that they were using in the offline world, the pre-COVID world, and trying to
Hmm.
paste them into the post-COVID world. While that can bridge the gap, so to speak, at this point, I don't think that is sustainable. We will really need to think of fresh thought right from the ground up to be able to build a more stronger and more secure future for all of us. Just look at work from home. Since you mentioned remote work, that is the huge transformational change that has actually happened, and
Right.
companies have embraced it. They've had no choice. But what's happened, Pawan, is that in the whole space, there's been such a transition, I would say, in the entire thought process, that employees are struggling with it currently. So while initially there was a lot of, I would say, initial excitement related to work from home, that, oh, I saved that travel and I don't have to face the pressures of rush hour traffic in a metro like Mumbai or Delhi or Bangalore, for the matter. Now it's reached a point of what I call a stressful adjustment that they've done. At home, they've
Right.
realized that it's the boundary between work and home has kind of blurred. When the office day starts, when it ends, is not exactly clear. They've got to manage the family, which could be young kids, it could be elderly parents. They miss that corridor chat, those smoke breaks with the colleagues outside. They miss some of that camaraderie, some of the nudging and pulling.
Yeah.
So it's created a whole new stress element, which employees are only now beginning to voice out, and HR leaders are now beginning to take cognizance of. So there will have to be a certain amount of work done in this direction. Initially, like I said, what has happened is everyone was used to the so-called fun Friday, get together in one of the meeting rooms or have some fun on the floor or in the cafeteria. Now what some HR folks are trying to do is get everyone onto a Zoom call, get your own coffee, get your own drink, and let's have a chit chat.
Right.
But what they're missing out on is that this is not possibly the right answer. Like they say, what works for Peter may not work for Paul.
Yeah.
So
True. Very true.
yeah, so there may be someone who wants to use that 1 hour time to be with his daughter or
Right.
help his parents with their medication or something. And you're literally forcing the guy to come onto a Zoom call because you think it's the fun Friday and you're making it less stressful for him, but you're actually going the other way.
Right. True.
So personalization will be the key.
Yeah.
HR folks in the remote mechanism will need to figure out what works for a Pawan, what works for a Vikas. If it's a Zoom call for a Pawan, it should be a Zoom call for you. If it's a telephone call for me, it should be a telephone call for me. If it's Saturday evening, 5 p.m. that suits me, it should be that. So really, it'll have to come down to, once again, going back to the core of HR and saying, how do I build my connection with this human being?
Mm.
That's what I would say is the need of the hour.
Interesting. Interesting. And I think you touched upon a lot of parts of the way working is going to happen. And I'm going to pick up one of them. And I
Sure.
think that's something that a lot of leaders are talking about and saying, does micromanaging really then help? Does it help to get the work done, or it's really not getting to do anything at all?
Great. Good question, yeah, Pawan. I've had the fortune, I would say, of seeing both sides of it with respect to my bosses at different
Yeah.
points,
Yeah.
and they both obviously come with their own advantages and disadvantages. But I'm clearly not on the fence on this one. And if you were to ask my team, I think micromanagement is one crime at least that they will not be able to blame me for. So, irrespective of whatever other crimes they think I might have committed, I'm a clear proponent of the fact that one can't micromanage, one shouldn't micromanage. It not
Okay.
only impedes the development of your team members and hampers their leadership journey, it equally hampers your journey as well, because we have to realize, right, Pawan, at the end of the day, that's only as many hours that we have. And if you are going to get bogged down by micromanaging work, then literally there is some amount of sacrifice or some amount of damage we'll be doing to our efforts in growing
Mm.
our leadership skills. So you can't cover the entire 360 breadth for sure. What happens in such a scenario is that typically you will face setbacks if the work is not done correctly or into the required level. But really, then again, if you introspect, it's really either one of two cases. One is
Yeah.
it's either a wrong hire, that person was not educationally or from the point of view of skills the right person for the job in the first place, or you haven't handholded or trained that person adequately,
Mm.
in which case I say that the buck again then comes back to the leader, because
Okay.
the hiring decision has been the leaders, the training has been the leaders. So it's time the leader owned up to that. So rather than micromanaging, I think the effort should be to kind of make sure that the right person, right fit in the job
Mm.
is the starting point, and then
Mm.
ensuring that the training, the coaching that happens sustains that individual going forward.
Okay.
The big gap that I see nowadays, I'll spend a few more minutes on this if that's okay with you, Pawan. Yeah,
Please, yeah. Go ahead.
is that in the corporate world, uh, at least the mid-level executives have been very comfortable with company-sponsored trainings in the past. In the sense that if your company is able to organize a leadership training for you and pay for it, you're more than happy to sign up and say, let me go to the nearest five-star where it's happening, or to the offsite where this leadership program is happening, and invest in yourself, like they say. If the same program is made available to an individual and is told that you need to pay out of your own pocket, uh, the uh, the amount of people who would opt for such a program is less than 20% of the original number,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I'm sure
absolutely.
in the training space you would have observed that as well firsthand.
Absolutely.
The same people, unfortunately, will be willing to spend the same 2-3 thousand rupees at the training cost, or 5,000, on an evening out in one of the fancy high street restaurants.
Yeah.
So it's been a false choice that many people have taken in the past, and I hope as an outcome of whatever we're going through today, that will change. Right.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
other element is also understanding the importance of coaching, because again, we fail to realize that even a Virat Kohli today, for all that he's achieved in his life and where he stands, still goes back to his coach periodically to get his art polished. How many of us in the executive space engage with a lifestyle coach, engage with a business coach? Ever since we
Yeah.
finish our graduation or our post graduation, even from the best of the institute, and we begin to feel that we've achieved it, we've done everything, our learning is complete. It's never that. So that is where I think when it comes to micromanagement, it's not only some of the leaders' responsibility, but the individuals as well, in terms of upgrading and enhancing his or her own skills.
Right. 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 From what I've also heard you talk about, and a lot of other leaders talk about, is empathy. It's whether I know it's like a buzzword or it's something that a lot of people had, but they want a lot of organizations want leaders now to demonstrate empathy. What do you think empathy will do to teams, especially in these times? Will it help? Will it make the teams more gain strength and more resolve?
I think empathy is going to just be the critical, decision making factor for employees to choose an organization, choose a leader that they want to work with. I'm sure in the recent past you would have heard of cases where we've already had a lot of resignations in a company like even Facebook, where
Yeah.
for some reason the employees have felt that their leadership has not been completely empathetic of what has happened in the United States in the recent weeks,
Right. Right.
in terms of supporting a very democratic and equal society. And
Yeah.
for someone to be able to leave or drop out of a career in a company like Facebook tells you what the word empathy really means today to a lot of people.
Mm.
And uh, it's taken a pandemic for many of us to realize it. But yes, I
Yeah.
think all of us are going closer and getting closer to each other. But we need to understand empathy in context of the larger ecosystem. And the fact is that we've become a very connected ecosystem. I was just reading the newspaper this morning and came across this news where one of the world's largest retailers, Zara, is going to shut down some 1,400 stores in the first phase. Right
Yeah.
now,
True.
if you look at it in one dimension, it's 1,400 stores closed. But if you really drill a little deeper down, you start understanding that it's got an impact ranging from not only some factory workers sitting in Vietnam
Yeah.
who are sitting and stitching those garments.
Yeah.
It's going to impact some cargo handlers who are shipping
Yeah.
that across the world.
Yeah.
It's going to impact all the way down to a valet who's parking cars at a South City mall in a city like Delhi.
Absolutely.
So just look at the kind of interchange or the connections that we have and the impact of single actions or single decisions that organizations take. And if we are not empathetic at a time like this, then companies will not really be ready for the future that lies ahead. In the recent years, what's happened, Pawan, is that unfortunately empathy has become something that gets leveraged on in corporate brochures. It gets remembered at Diwali time. It gets remembered when we have the annual ESAT survey coming up and you need a good score in the organization. So suddenly you'll have the managers talking very sweetly, you'll have nice flowery mails coming, you'll have a Friday fun event again. So that is an approach that will need to be sunset if companies are going to have to survive this current situation.
Very true.
You need to have empathy day in, day out in everything that you do.
Right.
The young mother who comes back from maternity leave and she does 7.5 hours on a job on in office one day, realizes that she's got marked half day because she didn't complete 8 hours.
Mm.
uh, Immediately realizes that this is not empathy. The systems in the organization are not built for empathy. So you've got to
Absolutely.
fix all of these little touch points and make them count.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you beautifully put that with the example of Zara, and also given the current times, with be it micromanagement, be it resilience, or even be it empathy. I think a lot of it is going to take a paradigm shift. I think companies and leaders are going to look at it more differently.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to ask you more and more questions. There's one question that came in
Sure.
yesterday when I posted this, and they wanted me to ask you. There is this leader from an IT company that we work with. He
Okay.
was asking me, I would want to know from Vikas, what are the three takeaways a leader can have when it comes to making resilience a daily habit in his life?
Awesome. So while there is no handbook, like I said right at the start,
Yeah,
and I don't think there are very simple takeaways, Pawan, for something like this.
yeah,
I Resilience is really forged through fire and experiences.
very
And
true.
uh, the best that I would recommend would be a couple of things which have worked for me. The first would obviously be is to understand yourself intrinsically. I think that's something that we possibly don't do enough, and that is understanding our strengths, our opportunity areas. What are your drivers? What are your failure points? Eventually, if you have to be resilient, I think what really works well is if you play to your strengths and guard your failure points or fortify your failure points.
Yeah,
And that intrinsically increases your chances of not really facing too many setbacks. And in case you do, then you actually already are guarded against them to some extent. So that would be my first guidance point. The
sure.
second one would be to read, and I think I can't overemphasize this. Reading is really something that a lot of people have moved away from over the years. I think we've got too many distractions in our lives,
Yeah,
but you have to realize that when you read a book on leadership or a book on self help, you're literally getting someone else's 30 or 40 years of experience and learnings in a distilled manner, as that's handout or that handbook which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And it'd be foolish of us to refuse something like that.
Right.
Fair. There's literally someone who's toiled, who's been through the fire, who's taken out the time and effort to put it down so that others can benefit. And we are very fortunate in a country like India also, Pawan. You're aware that prices of books compared to what they retail at in the West, for example, are negligible.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I know we do have a huge piracy-stricken market as well, which I totally wouldn't advise. But that is the number one investment that one should do once the possibly the salary check comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
The third important element which I would share is possibly physical activity, and
Hmm.
it is been proven time and again by different people. Again, I think I've tested it enough on myself. Whenever I am in a consistent space of working out physically in whatever little way that works out for me, I just find my entire approach elevated. The energy levels, to the mindset, to the way I attack problems. So I know it can be a bit of a bother for someone who's not in that space or not acclimatized to working out physically or some physical activities. But it's a graph that rises very quickly,
Mm.
and a lot of again studies and a lot of experts guide that it's a habit which can easily be picked up within 21 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it makes complete sense to at least give it a shot if one is not, and start small with 10-15 minutes a day, build it up from there. That works.
Yeah.
As one last bonus point that I might share is something again which works from protecting once against adversity or failure, is maintaining a to-do list, which is a combination of the four quadrants that come out of important and urgent activities,
Right. Right.
which helps you kind of focus both on the here and now and what is important but also not so here, which is important in the distant future but will become damaging if not addressed
Correct.
in a reasonable time frame. so
Correct.
so the combination of all of these is something that I think works very well for making yourself more resilient and
Yeah.
avoiding failure,
Yeah.
bouncing back if something untoward happens. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say, Pawan.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think you beautifully put the whole physical, mental, combination of a person. Getting his 15 minutes of his time to read, maybe another 15 minutes to be active, another 15 minutes to introspect.
Right.
I think if all of these come together, you get to probably plan your day much better. I think these are just basic daily habits you can put together.
Correct. It takes
Uh,
effort. I'll be honest, Pawan. I'll just
yeah,
share
yeah,
a quick tip here because it's often challenging in our daily lives, right? We've got so many work, family, and other personal commitments that we need to keep, balancing. But again, uh, since I'm a huge technology fan, there are a number of apps again like Productive, for example, which you can just put in reminders for yourself that okay, in my day I must do 15 minutes, like you said, of reading or 15 minutes of exercising,
wow,
and even tracking that with those alerts a few times during the day quickly gets you back into, oh yes, I missed that for today, and almost 3/4 of the day is out. Let me just take out a 15 minutes and do it. It works wonders. I would recommend if anyone's listening to try some of these out.
fantastic. Productive. That's the name of the app,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Lovely, fantastic. So great. I had kind of slotted in 30 minutes to chat, and I know there is a world of information lying in there that you even share. With the HR in the Heart series, and I think I love that.
Thanks.
As I said, LinkedIn is a great place for us to share information. But this has been a great exclusive chat with you. Leadership resilience is something that I have been talking to a lot of clients as well, and I think this came in the right time to talk to you and learn more about your observation insights with the leaders that you work with. So thank you so much, and we will also have your email ID put out in the chat link so people can even get in touch with you for anything that they need one-on-one. Thank you so much, Vikas. Thanks for your time, and thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll have you back next week again, another interesting webinar series with another business or CX. So thank you.
Thank you, Pawan. Really pleasure being with you, and all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.